Hello and welcome to the latest EnvCast episode. EnvCast is a Society for the Environment podcast, bringing you environmental professionals in conversation each month. Each episode is designed to provide insight into the life of registered environmental professionals, featuring experts from across a wide range of sectors and disciplines. We explore what they do, why they do it, how they got to where they are now, and their future ambitions. Each guest has verified their environmental credentials by achieving Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registration. To learn more about the Society for the Environment or our environmental registrations, please visit socenv.org.uk. That's socenv.org.uk. Enjoy the episode. Hello, I'm Phil from the Society for the Environment and welcome to this month's EnvCast episode. Similar to our latest episode with Alex Cook, today I'm very pleased to be joined by another Chartered Environmentalist who is linked to the water sector, which is a sector that is keeping us hydrated, clean and alive generally. So it's extremely important. Today's special guest gained their Chartered Environmentalist registration via their membership of the Institute of Water 10 years ago this year, which I don't know if they're aware of at all, but 10 years ago. So I'm very pleased to welcome Rob Bradley. Thank you very much for joining us, Rob.
Phil, it's an absolute joy and pleasure to be with you today.
That's good to have you. I'm always interested. Whereabouts are you joining us from today?
I'm speaking to you today from Edinburgh, which is where my home is. And currently, nice sunshine, no frost, no snow.
Recently, we've had last two episodes were from New Zealand and Leicestershire. So with Scotland as well, got a bit of variety, which is always nice. So I'll hand over to you for now, Rob, if you could just give us an overview of what you currently do.
Certainly. So I joined the Institute of Water as an employee in January this year. I previously did some work from July last year, initially as a bridging contract to help provide the Institute with a bit of continuity in the context of registrations and mentoring. And then that's evolved over time as I've got to grips with a variety of tasks and the backlog of registrations, which were had accumulated. Let's just leave it at that. So although I do have a day-to-day job, a large portion of what this year is set aside to do is development and digitization of the assessment process, specifically regard to registrations. The Institute of Water, for those of you who aren't aware of it, founded in 1947 by operators, as they were then known, the technical arm of the water sector, mainly as a knowledge-sharing platform. And it's gradually evolved from there to encompass everybody who works within the water sector. So on that note, we are unique in the British professional membership organization, insofar as we are the only one to provide or be licensed to provide 3 grades of registration across 3 disciplines. So that's science, engineering, and environment, and 3 grades within each. And one of the missions that we have both this year and for the next couple is to really emphasize our roots and our heritage and encourage apprenticeships and technician grades to join and achieve registration through us. So therefore, digitizing and improving the overall assessment process is integral to that. But in addition to that is reaching out and having good, strong dialogues with companies that provide apprenticeship programs, licensed to operate programs internally, and working very much with them to ensure and engage memberships at a technician grade and to encourage them to join the iWater family, as we know ourselves, and to embark on the registration journey that we all know, love, and embrace. But then again, I am quite biased there. So,
and you're right in saying about the iWater being a family, because it certainly has that feel. I've been to a few Institute of Water events. I've been to a number of our licensed members events, but the Institute of Water in particular feels so much like a family. It's incredible. I don't know how that came about, whether it was a specific project at one point by the Institute of Water, but it's so obvious when you go to these events. So many people know each other and they're so very friendly, which is strange to say, I know, but some of the events you go to are quite corporate and that kind of thing. And clearly there's a lot of professionalism there, but it's very friendly. I don't know if that comes across to you.
One of the reasons, or one of the ways we achieve this, there's a couple, but one of the main ways we achieve this is that we label ourselves as being non-hierarchical. And essentially what that means in practice is that if you go, say, to a conference, you'll have your name and your company, but not your position on your badge.
Oh.
We encourage people to speak to each other so that you can be a new entrant straight into from school or from university, or someone who's nearing retirement, and have a meaningful discussion. And that way, that cross-generational literal knowledge sharing and engagement functions on so many levels, both at that event, but also subsequently when, we've all been there, you see someone from a distance, you can't remember their name, but, I met you at, and this is what we talked about. And yeah, it works every time.
Always nice events to go to. In terms of the digitalization, is that a lot to do with the processes, or is it will people who visit the Institute of Water website, for example, because I know you got a new website, will they start to see things changing on there as well?
So the new website's part of this,
right?
But the main things which are happening at the moment are behind the scenes, and it's essentially to streamline how the assessment process operates, and primarily that's through having all folders and all candidates' information on a SharePoint system, so that we essentially totally reduce any emails and in turn improve confidentiality so that people aren't sending large amounts of personal information across the internet as well.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. That's something that we've been considering quite a lot at the Society for the Environment. In the past, we still currently do have promotional banner images, for example, at the bottom of our signatures, which then you have the balance between promotional marketing opportunities potentially, but it depends who you're emailing, really. If you're emailing people who already know more about the Society for the Environment than we do, then they probably know these things are going on anyway. So being relatively specific in that sense helps. It's fair to say. So with your current role, what kind of experience or qualifications or skills did you need to be able to get the role that you're in at the moment in terms of the registration manager at the Institute of Water? Is your registration background pretty key to that?
I'd say it's integral, yeah. To go back a little bit in time, so I became registered a decade ago. It doesn't feel that long, it has to say. I became an assessor in 2015, which basically enabled me and everybody else that does this role from a volunteer perspective, a much greater perspective on what a good registration application looks like, and also how to encourage people through the review process as well. So that experience in itself is utterly fantastic. It's the most rewarding opportunity an institute can give you as a member, in my experience. I said before, I'm biased, but everybody I've spoken to who is an assessor totally agree that it's a phenomenal feeling to help people, not just at that particular stage in their career, but also open up and talk about themselves and their career in circumstances where there's no pressure in terms of an employment outcome, but simply acknowledging that the registration process in itself is a goal. That journey is a goal in itself, and it recognizing the talent and the potential that each of us include, but very often have problems or don't have the opportunity to articulate it either to other professionals or family or anybody else. So assessment process, integral to my role. But the other two things are the registration authority, where the Society of the Environment. I began my first of two shifts in there in 2019. So registration authorities exist in all licensed bodies. And it's the group of volunteers from licensed bodies who assemble and oversee how the standards are applied throughout the licensed members. Generally speaking, pre-COVID, there were quarterly meetings. and we'd get together, and there'd be, because in the case of the Society of Environment, there were 25, I think there's now 26. I was a meeting last week where another group were onboarded, let's say.
Is this member bodies or licensed members?
Licensed members.
Licensed members.
Yeah, distinction is important. Yeah,
27. Yeah,
27. Yeah, so two have come on board in the last less than a few months. How they apply the standards. So I mentioned the number of assessors we have, processes we follow, the CPD elements and how that is managed is integral to how a membership organization performs. The registration authority provides guidance and support and ensure those standards are met. And that, in a nutshell, is the body and the purpose of it. Over the course of COVID, ironically enough, we also took the opportunity through a lot of membership engagement to introduce a third registration grade, and that is Registered Environmental Professional, which, if you understand the Ofwat qualification tables, that's about level 5. Technicians being level 3, chartership being level 7, so level 5 is in the middle, first degree stage. And that was absolutely fascinating because that brought together elements of technician, elements of chartership, and made it really focused on that practitioner level, the people who were coming through the apprenticeship degree programs, and also for those people who were at a kind of midpoint in their career, not quite knowing where they wanted to go in terms of career direction or responsibility. And the practitioner level is absolutely ideal for that. It slots right in.
Absolutely. So I imagine that experience pulling all that together. So that's work with the Society for the Environment's Registration Authority. There must be so many different transferable skills to the role that you're doing now. Not least having, well, you already had a lot of experience when it comes to registration and assessing, but even more in depth, I suppose, when you look into the nuts and bolts of every single, with the standards review you've recently done, every single sentence and word within the practice directions, which is basically the standards for each professional registration that SOCEnv offers. It must have built your knowledge quite a lot, really.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the registration authority is that we are a group of people who come from, again, broad backgrounds, different licensed bodies, and we each bring different things to the table. So the grammatical precision of understanding each word in the context in a registration, in a grade, a sub-competency section is important, and how that's perceived and how it all knits together.
Well, having known who else is on the registration authority, there is quite a mix of characters in the way that they work, if that might not be the right way to say it, but they will come from different angles in terms of looking at things like standards documents and the broader picture and how does that work within the employment world and that kind of thing. So it's been fascinating to watch it develop from very much the sidelines. I don't get involved in it at all, but I clearly see things happening through colleagues and that kind of thing. But in terms of your role with the Institute of Water, you might have already touched on this. What would be your favourite part of the job?
Favorite part of the job, hands down, is talking to people. Talking to people and helping their careers. And I know that sounds really trite and a throwaway remark, but actually, it's the nuts and bolts, and it's the essence of my own career goals at this stage in my overall career. And I know that we'll touch on to the myriad of previous careers I've engaged with. But yeah, helping people. The best way to describe this is that I have also been a mentor as a volunteer. And the difference between a mentor and a coach, especially from a professional engagement perspective, is that a coach will have a specific goal and encourage and show examples for the person to get to there. The mentor helps the mentee, the person at the recipient end of this, identifying what those goals could be and shape them to take their own decisions and make them and help themselves to get to that goal. In that process, there's a light bulb moment. And it's like that magician trick where you reach behind someone's ear and you pull a key out. And they realize that that key is to their own development. And they've had it on that person the entire time. And be able to do that in a mentoring relationship, from a registration perspective, CPD, or just on a one-to-one call, talking to someone about any aspect of what I do at the moment, you're always looking for that light bulb moment. But the sweet bit may be that it happens after the phone call, and they'll tell me about it at a conference, for example. And
yeah. So is mentoring is something you did before landing this job, for example, but it's something that you've previously very much enjoyed, and you've been able to bring that across, and you're still able to do that now?
Unfortunately, not to the same extent. And that's primarily because within this role, I'm responsible for the assessment, registration, and mentoring for almost 3,000 members that we have. So to do that on a one-to-one basis, slight conflict of interest, unfortunately.
Yeah. But you're able to enable other professionals to take that kind of responsibility up and to help develop their own careers through mentoring or being a mentee and so on. Good.
Absolutely.
Good to hear. I've experienced mentoring, and as in being a mentee, and it's of great benefit. It's fair to say. I probably need to get back on that as well. But that's an action for me after this podcast. So you touched on it just then, but it's fair to say that this particular job is a touch different to roles you've had in the past. What has your career journey looked like so far?
For those that know me somewhat well, this is a fairly familiar story that I use to introduce myself. So my career has been a bit more of a verb than a noun. I've careered through different sectors and through different jobs for many years, long before it became trendy in my head. But I was a chef for about 15 years total.
You were a chef?
I was a chef, yeah, professional chef.
I wasn't expecting this, but carry on. Yep.
And that's fine. So I joined working in restaurants when I was about 18 as a dishwasher, as a dishwasher, waiter, and a barman. And eventually I evolved over time and places. I worked in America for 3 years, in France a little bit, in west coast of Scotland, country house hotels, that kind of thing, for the best part of a decade. And then I went to university when I was in my late 20s, early 30s. My degree is in history, specifically modern history initially, and then I specialized in environmental history. And that, at that time, was a very new course. This was in the early 2000s. And specifically, that the principles of environmental history is the nuance and history of how we as humans have used or taken delight in our surroundings. So some of that is economics, some of that is social, some of that is religious to a certain extent. A lot of it is nuanced, looking at how different species have been addressed and used. So the definitions of what constitutes vermin, for example, have changed vastly over the years. And before I get on to the next stage of my career, the one aspect of those courses, which even 20 years ago still resonates strongly with me now, is the principles and the concept of what nature means and what is natural. Is that something that humans are part of, or is it something that we sit aside from? And it's that symbiotic balance that basically drives me to remain being an environmentalist and addressing how the two aspects of society, if you like, function and operate within each other. So from history degree graduation, I worked in conservation, what was then Scottish National Heritage, for 3 years in nature reserves in the best beautiful places in Scotland. I did a variety of surveys. I helped with deer management. which is essentially helping take deer carcasses off the hill after they've been shot and helping butcher and prepare them. And my previous career as a chef was valuable in that process, let's say. And to see the benefits of the reduction of grazing pressure in terms of natural tree regeneration. And eventually, I moved to Edinburgh. I had a job for a couple of years working with the Scottish National Scottish Wildlife Trust, I beg your pardon, where I oversaw the digitization of their biodiversity records. From there, I then joined the water sector in 2007. My main roles there were digitizing rehabilitation drawings. So this was work that had been done on behalf of the water company, Scottish Water at that time, putting pipes into the ground. And I was digitizing them, putting them onto a computer system. From there, I evolved education and learning to understand about leakage, to understand about water balances between different areas, how water is measured, so surveying and understand the performance management of metering and loggers associated with that measurement. I spent about 6 years working direct secondment with Scottish Water's operation team, doing contingency planning for emergency response and their unplanned interruption to supply metrics. And then from there, a little bit more about design work, looking at the water quality measurement aspects. So very specifically down to sensors and measuring turbidity and chlorine, that kind of thing. So lots of detail. And then where I am now is obviously different, but the opportunity and the experiences that I have mean that I can understand technical information in the context of the water sector. I can understand the broader biodiversity and nature-based solutions aspects of wastewater management. I can understand and engage with people at strategic level in terms of what water policy should look like, and ask the questions that no one dares to ask, or which is basically how much time can you afford in your months to devote to yourself and your own personal development.
What I gathered from that, apart from being a very interesting career so far, is the interesting transferable skills. I mean, the first one was an interesting one, from being a chef to a wildlife management, which makes a lot of sense, but it probably doesn't make that kind of connection most of the time. And then it was the digitalization, which seemed to be the theme between the different roles that you've had, which was interesting to hear about. And obviously the role you have now has a reasonable amount of digitalization involved in it as well. So do you see that as quite a core function of where you've managed to, probably wasn't that much digitalization in being a chef as such, but it might have been a bit. But
no, there was none when I was a chef.
No, fair enough.
So, in fact, actually, when I went to I did an access course before I went to university, which was basically teaching you how to learn. And I remember vividly being shown Excel for the first time, and within about 10 minutes, realizing the power and the potential of what this simple tool could do, mainly because 3 hours every Sunday was sat down with double entry bookkeeping and going through the restaurant accounts. So taking 3 hours out of your day to be able to do it on a spreadsheet, it just makes so much sense. So it's interesting because I don't see digital skills rather as being a important or a talent within what I do. I appreciate it. It's been with me all my life. I always probably defer to people who do this for a living. What I see is the way that digitization can improve business process and practice. And in some respects, the actual flavor of that digital tool is immaterial. What's much more important is, does it do what we want it to do? And can we keep it simple enough to fix it if necessary?
Is that mainly to do with data and the way that's presented and then understood? Or
That's part of it, but it's the processes. So how chunks of data relate to each other in the process in the course of that process.
now, through a bit of LinkedIn research, you achieved your Chartered Environmentalist registration when you were a project engineer with RPS Europe. So was that role specifically, did that help you in terms of your Chartered Environmentalist registration, or was it it must have been a mixture of the previous roles you'd done in terms of wildlife management and so on, but did that role fit into that mix?
It did at the time. By that time, I'd been in the sector for 4 years, so my technical knowledge had grown a lot. But the registration process and the mentors I had at that time really helped me engage my focus of what examples I could bring to the registration competencies, specifically how I'm using things. And the other thing about that process is that it helped me really think about how I define the environment and how I'm helping it. So 20 years of caring about the environment, but then the registration process helped me articulate how I feel about it in a much more cleaner way. Within the project engineer side of things, it helped me grow from being a project engineer to a team leader, because I could again take a step back from the detail and see the broader picture.
So within RPS, that's where you became a chartered environmentalist. Was that a decision that were you personally driven to become a chartered environmentalist, or was it something that the organisation at the time was quite keen on? Was it a mixture of the two, or were they not too aware of it then?
They weren't totally aware of it. I joined the Institute of Water in 2010, and registration was a way for me to draw together all the strengths and weaknesses, actually, of my previous careers, and really use that to cement who I am and what I can do and grow my capabilities, both within RPS and the sector in general.
Okay, makes sense. So what does being a chartered environmentalist mean to you after 10 years?
After 10 years, it means a great deal to me. It's literally a badge I'm very proud to wear on my sleeve or a lapel on occasion. It reminds myself that the environment underpins everything we are, and how we engage with it, look after it, promote it, and support it is, in my opinion, the most important thing that we as humans can do. And the Chartered Environmentalist badge and standard demonstrates to the world and anybody that cares to ask, I'm happy to do this, and I'm proud to do this.
I feel like my next question is fairly redundant after that answer, but how important is it to be recognised as an environmental professional? And given your role and the fact that you are a chartered environmentalist, I imagine there's a fair amount of biasness, possibly
just a small amount, yeah.
Smidge, yeah. But I imagine the importance that you put on it for not just yourself, but others who are working through, whether it's the water sector or other sectors, from a how important the environment topic is, because it's so broad now, in terms of being recognised as a professional registration, a environmental professional, that must be pretty high up there for you.
It's as high as it gets. One of the themes throughout this discussion is obviously talking about myself is great for my ego, but essentially what I do these days is helping other people and providing support and structure to other people to help achieve their goals in an environmental context, even if they weren't aware there was an environmental context, is a fabulous thing to be able to do. And for my own CPD, it reinforces the same message that linking people with the environment to help support ourselves is not only the right thing, but it's essential for us to do.
Quite agree. So for others who are thinking about a career in the environment and potentially progressing towards Chartered Environmentalist registration, what kind of thoughts and words would you have for them at the moment?
Two, basically. First of all, give yourself some goals. Think about what the environment means to you and write them down. And have them somewhere where you can pick them up on a monthly or a weekly basis and have some time with yourself thinking about those goals and what you can do about it. There are 3 grades out there from technician through to chartership. You do not need to go for chartership straight out the box. In fact, I highly recommend you don't. Find one that fits you for what you're doing at the moment and what you think you can achieve, because life changes. If COVID's taught us one thing, we have to be adaptable and resilient to something that we don't know is coming. So find something that you can achieve in a comparatively short time and get yourself a mentor to help you with that process. So time for yourself, find a mentor.
And we've mentioned mentors a few times, and the Institute of Water there are quite a few mentors within the Institute of Water. Is that a particular program that people can get in touch with you about and then potentially be linked up with a relevant person?
So we have an online platform for mentoring, and it works a bit like a dating platform. So you put your profile up as a mentor, profile up as a mentee. There are some drop downs that you can choose in the context of what exactly you're liking to get out of that relationship, which I bring back to what I said earlier. It helps really if you've got a development goal in mind. And then the software helps link people together, and it's up to them to develop the relationship as fit. Within the tool itself, there's a lot of supporting documentation and information to help that relationship develop and also record it. The recording of how you manage and make progress is really important in the context of both registration, which I'm going to naturally biasly come back to, but also much more important, your own personal growth and development. The ability to reflect on your choices in the past and understand the benefit. Did it meet your expectation? How much quality you've put into achieving your goal, or quality activities rather, and then assessing that on an annual basis is basically what CPD is about, continuing professional development. Do something for a specific reason and then think about why you did it.
Well, there's a few key takeaways there for the last few things we've just discussed. So for those listening, there's have a rewind, listen to those again, and there's probably a few actions to take away from that. So quite a simple question, but normally a complex answer. But what's next for you?
So I've got a really clear job plan for the next year in terms of the registration role within the Institute of Water. I have another couple of strings to my bow. So one of them is developing my capability to be an apprenticeship assessor, but outside of the Institute and for training companies. And that's partly to grow my own capabilities to help that particular demographic. I think it's important, and it's something that I hold very close to myself. I was a mature student. After COVID and with some of the political messaging which is coming out, for people to pick up a new career in your 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s is no longer unusual. And these days, it's actually increasingly tenable to do, especially with remote working. So to help facilitate and grow people who have had the self-confidence knocked out of them by the redundancy or by illness or by grief, that's something I really want to work on and help develop.
Well, that sounds like something very, very useful to concentrate on. New entrants into the water sector or the environment sector, if you can call it that, can only be a good thing. Our final question, which we ask every EnvCast guest, is if you were able to influence world leaders for a day, what would be the thing that you would focus on?
A theme from this afternoon as well is get people to talk to each other in a way that's constructive. We cannot achieve anything unless we compromise. So and compromise is the process of having to give and take. Demonstrate that in your rhetoric, dial down the division.
And that's a message for them to work together, I suppose, as well as to be an inspiration to those around them as well, I suppose. Thank you very much for that final answer, and thank you very much for joining us today, Rob. It's been an absolute pleasure. As always, we've spoken many times, and given your newish role within the Institute of Water, I very much look forward to working with you even more over the next year or years. Now, if you wanted to follow in Rob's footsteps and become a chartered environmentalist and showcase your environmental knowledge, please check out the Institute of Water website, which is instituteofwater.org.uk. That's Institute of Water as one word, essentially. If you are already a chartered environmentalist, I would encourage you to get involved in the I Am CEnv campaign by shouting about your chartered environmentalist registration on social media. If you just search for the hashtag I Am CEnv on Twitter or LinkedIn, and you'll find examples, and I'd very much encourage you to join in. So this podcast is going out in April, and April is I Am CEnv month. So we want to showcase who a chartered environmentalist is and why they are so amazing, essentially. If you aren't a chartered environmentalist, then search for the hashtag, and it's an opportunity for you to get inspired. Next month, we delve into the world of environmental professionals in the armed forces. So thank you again to Rob, and I look forward to seeing everyone else then.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's EnvCast episode. If you'd like to hear more about the Chartered Environmentalist, Registered Environmental Practitioner, or Registered Environmental Technician registrations, please look at our resources available at socenv.org.uk. Alternatively, visit our YouTube channel, where you can find a variety of environmental webinar series, registration guides, and various insights from registrants themselves. Just search for Society for the Environment on YouTube. To keep up to date with what's going on at the Society for the Environment, you can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram via @socenv_HQ, and via LinkedIn by searching for Society for the Environment with SocEnv in the brackets. We will release a new EnvCast episode on the first Wednesday of each month, so if you're interested in future podcasts, please do subscribe. You can subscribe and review through a variety of platforms such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Castbox.